It is a pleasure for me to work with Brother Mike Hatcher. He is a person that believes in the same things I believe in. He believes in spreading the gospel as far as it can go, and in defending the truth from those that would compromise it. It's amazing sometimes thoughts that come to your mind, but as I was sitting there looking down at two brethren here that are, well, just like bosom buddies to me, Brother McLeish and Brother Cates. And as I looked at those two, and I thought of the time that my wife and I went to Europe and bought combi campers and went overland, all over Europe, visiting the work there, then down through the Near East and the Middle East, across southern Asia, as far as the Bay of Bengal at Calcutta, India, under our own power. We passed many of these camel trains that were still using that overland route that led from Europe into China. And I noticed that there was always a little donkey in front of each of those camel trains, and then there was this huge camel right behind the donkey. And I thought, well, look at there. There is a camel train, or at least the beginning of one, sitting there on the second row. And they'll have to decide which is which. It is a surprise to them, I'm sure. But the next time you're across there, you'll see what I mean. Brethren, when I was given this subject, I thought, well, I don't know of one that I have had more experience with than this one. I did appreciate the way our lectureship started last evening, with Brother Noah in the beginning and Brother Cates winding it up, and what a wonderful evening it was. If we can just sort of hold up that standard all the way through, we're going to have a lectureship par excellence. When I went into the kitchen that day and asked my wife if she would go with me as missionaries to Singapore, she just had 4 words, "When do we leave?" And I said, well, we've got to get ready first. And if I had had the slightest notion of what it would take to get ready, I do not know if I would have asked her to go or not. I would probably have had second thoughts about going myself. And that in spite of the fact that I had promised God back in March 2nd, 1939, that I would not stop until the gospel had gone to every creature among all nations in all the world, or I would die in the attempt. I do not know what it is that motivates some elders. I do know that you will occasionally find an eldership that is just simply wonderful. Take, for instance, the one here at Bellview. I've worked with these brethren now for, this is the 20th year. And we have worked hard, and we have carried the gospel into many, many countries, and have done our best to defend the truth against those that would corrupt it. But brethren, do you know that that is not average among the elderships? There is an eldership at Memphis that has my great respect, and they too are concerned that the gospel be preached in its purity and simplicity as far as it can go. And that is the church at what is now called Forest Hill, formerly Knight Arnold. And brethren, those people just pour themselves into the work. And I do not know what is the limit of their undertaking, but it is enormous. When I first tried to find an eldership that would take my sponsorship, I did not know really fully what an eldership was supposed to do. I also did not know fully what a sponsorship is supposed to do. There are those that take the position that they didn't have sponsoring churches back then, and why do we have to have them now? Well, I don't know what you call those people in the 13th chapter of Acts. There's one thing I do notice about them. They had certain men that were looked out that they could depend upon. And if you've got a missionary to go into some other country that you can depend upon, then I would suggest to any eldership you give him lots of leeway, because otherwise you're going to tie him down and he cannot accomplish his work. But I would further say that if you cannot depend upon him like that, then don't send him at all. Because, brethren, he's going to be far from where you are, and it's very difficult to oversee in person somebody that's thousands of miles from your eyesight. But here we had a case of the Holy Spirit causing this to be done. And the men that sent them out laid their hands upon them, indicating that they had their full support and endorsement. And the ones that they sent out were men that had proved themselves already before they were sent. This is another thing I never will understand. How some elderships will pick somebody up by the hair of the head that has had no proving at all and send him, and then they are always astonished why that person didn't turn out. Brethren, these men need to be trained and proved before they're ever sent out, because of the reasons I've already given. But as I was trying to find a church with elders, I was to be 7 months in active effort before I could ever find one. Now, the church where I was the Central Church in Seattle. They had no elders. They said, if you cannot find a church with elders to send you, then you come back to us and we'll send you. But while I was out trying to find somebody to send us, the son-in-law of one of those men in that congregation had gone to a lawyer to see what sponsorship means. Brethren, the Scripture says we cannot say, thou fool. So I just say that the children of this world are wiser in their generation than at least some of the children of light. And when I think about when I got back trying to find an eldership, those fellows not only did not want to send me, they wanted to crucify me. Because that lawyer that this man had gone to had told them that sponsorship meant that if Brother Rice does not succeed in his work, then you're going to be responsible for repaying all of the money that he raised to all of those churches and congregations that gave it, even if it includes selling your house and all your possessions in order to repay it. Well, in the churches of Christ, we never have used the word sponsorship like that. That may be the legal term. I don't know. But I do know that's what that lawyer said to that man. And as a result, I had extreme difficulty in finding a sponsorship. After having visited elderships in many states. Finally, the church at Hampton Place, Dallas, having at that time 4 elders, soon one resigned, and so we had 3. But they said, we will send you and we'll put $200 a month on your support, provided you can raise the rest of it. Now, if fellowship is joint participation, I would say that their fellowship with me was, to say the least, rather limited. But I was determined to go, and they were willing to serve as my sponsorship, and so I went out trying to find churches and individuals that would support, have fellowship with my work. We had a preacher by the name of Logan Buchanan. If you're any kin to him, I'm not responsible. But this man knew that I was out trying to raise fellowship so that we might carry the gospel to the far corners of this earth. And when he would find out where I was going, then he would wait till I had already gone and had got them all committed, ready to help. Then he'd go right behind me and undermine my work to them. So that after 3 months, instead of having all this money flowing in that I had raised, these brethren were just canceling out just as fast as that fellow could find them. When I found out what was happening, I called on Brother Boyd Latham, one of the elders, and a great leader. And I told him what was happening. And I said, Brother Boyd, I don't know what to do. I said, as fast as I go out to raise this fellowship, this man is going right behind me and getting it knocked out. And there's no way, if this is going to continue, there isn't any way that I'll ever leave these shores. Well, he was in Lubbock, Texas. He took the next plane, came back to Dallas, called a meeting of the elders and deacons, and Logan Buchanan and dear old Brother Rice. I was a young man at that time. And so Brother Latham, before this august body, said to him, have you been doing this? He said, yes. And he said, well, why have you been doing this? Well, he said, we are bursting at the seams. We have 300 members. We cannot seat anymore. And we've got to have a larger building. Now, if this church is going to sponsor Brother Rice to carry the gospel overseas, we don't have the money to have a building also. And so we've got to decide whether we're going to have the building that we have to grow, or whether you're going to send Brother Rice overseas. Well, Brother Latham said we could have done both. He said, are you saying, Brother Logan, that it's either him or you? Well, he said, yes, that's what I'm saying. Well, Brother Latham said, well, Logan, we just hate to see you go. They had determined that I was going to go carry the gospel across the seas. Well, they fired him on the spot. Poor fellow. He eventually went off of the Methodist and died a Methodist. Can you imagine the Logan Buchanan that some of us thought we knew in those days that would finally wind up in a denominational church and die? Well, after we got that stopped, it took 8 more months. I'd already been raising funds supposedly for 3. It took 8 more months to try to get the rest of it together, either in cash or in purposes. Well, finally 11 months had gone by. And I said to my wife, by that time I had gone back into Seattle, I said to her, can you think of anything else I could do? I said, we've got the purposes, but most of these purposes, and by the way, almost all of those purposes were to help after I arrived on the field. Almost nobody purposed to help me get to the field. And it was going to, I had my wife and 4 children at that time. Still got my wife. And she's sitting right there. But we had one afterthought in Singapore. That made 5. But at any rate, we had all these, and they had to get overseas. How are you going to get people overseas unless you're going to put in the money before they go overseas? Because if all you do is a purpose to help them after they get overseas and they can't ever get over there, then you see you're off the hook. And that's what they were counting on, apparently, brethren, that I would never make it. But I did. God helping me, and also Brother Boyd Latham. After I had been in Seattle for some days, I was wondering what more could I do, and I talked it over with Veda. She said, "Looks like you've done everything you could do." I said, "There's one more thing that I haven't done that I could do," and she said, "What's that?" I said, "I could go down and make reservations to leave 1 week from today." She said, "Yeah, you could do that." I know what she was thinking. I haven't asked her, but I know she thought what she was thinking. She was thinking, brother, that money is not available, and it's not going to be available a week from today. But it was a situation where I was getting desperate, brethren, personally. 7 months to get a sponsorship, and 11 months to get support, a total of 18 months, and most of that support not going to help me until we got over there. I went down maybe a day or so after I had made reservations, and there was just one envelope. Now, brethren, I believe in the envelope system. Any of you that know me well know that I keep envelopes in your hands constantly. I know that Sister Nadine Masterson believes that I believe in the envelope system. She's got an envelope right there. If she hadn't already turned it in, I saw it this morning. And so, but I found this, that you have to have usually a multiplicity of envelopes if it's going to amount to anything. But that morning there was only one envelope. And I opened it up. It was from Boyd Latham. Inside he had a check for $3,000. He said, "Brother Ira," he said, "you've been here long enough. Now," he said, "you take this money and you buy your tickets. And you get gone to Singapore. But," said, "if you can ever get it back, I'd like for you to repay it because I borrowed this money. But," he said, "if you don't ever get it back enough to repay it, you don't owe it." This was an elder, brethren. The elders normally don't think that way. But he did. And so I bought my tickets. Well, I think I told you last year about what happened next. Our little boy came down with measles. And I went to the travel agent. I said, "What can I do? Here, this boy come down with measles, and we're trying to leave, so we leave tomorrow." And I said, "What to do?" She said, "I'm not telling you to do this, but," she said, "here's what I would do if I'd been through all you have. I would cover that boy up. And I wouldn't even notice that he had the measles till I was away out over the Pacific Ocean, too far to get back. And I would find out then." And so when we were on the plane next day, I covered him up, real good. We all got on the plane. And after we were about 500 miles outside of this country, on the Pacific Ocean, way yonder, I uncovered him. I said, "I believe this boy's got measles." And I did. I believed that. And I knew that was the case. He'd had those measles for 2 or 3 days, a couple of days maybe. we got overseas. And the brethren back home then had to decide whether they were going to, as we say, fish or cut bait. Listen to me. They had promised that once I got over there, the money would be available. And I had enough purposes that I should have had plenty. Do you know that at least a third of those that said they would help after we got there never sent a dime? And that, a lot of folks think I have a peculiar viewpoint about this brotherhood. Brethren, I do. And I'll tell you how I got it. It was through such experiences as that. I just don't understand churches and elders and preachers and individuals in the congregation that will make a purpose and then not keep it. I just don't understand it. I do remember one, after this thing was known, I got a postcard from a man by the name of C.E.W. Doris. Now, I think he's got one of the books, one of the commentaries in the Advocate series. C.E.W. Doris. And he wrote me a postcard in pencil. I wish I'd kept that. I don't know. I can't find it. But I have it memorized. He said, "Dear Brother Ira, you will succeed as you don't know when you're licked." C.E.W. Doris. And I guess that's the way it is, brother. I just simply refuse to recognize defeat. Some of the brethren that promised, there were at least 10 families, 10 preachers promised that they would come after we were already overseas. They purposed to be there. Not one of them ever showed up. And you might say, well, what was the difference? I think, my opinion is that the difference was that they recognized defeat. And I didn't. I still don't. Recently, in the last few years, we've had several. We've had, we've had Brother Wiggins. He purposed to go to the Far East and tried hard to get support to go. He never was able to, he was able to get one-time gifts. That's another dodge that a lot of us have. We get the feeling that if we will purpose to do something to fellowship one time, that somehow gets us, that we fellowship. But do you know that the continuing work requires continuing support? And you just can't have that kind of support unless brethren get past the one-time gift idea. Now, we've got Brother Gus O here. He can tell you something about that. Boy, he's got a story. Ooh-wee. I wish I could put him in volume 1, but he's going to be in volume 2. I knew him in volume 1, but I didn't. But his big story didn't come out till volume 2. And so, Gus, you're going to be in. Just don't pass on until I get that thing done. But brethren, one-time gifts is all that Brother Wiggins could ever get those brothers to commit themselves to. So after he had worked for a long time, I think maybe 5 or 6 months, he finally decided that nobody was going to give more than just the one time, and he could not go. Well, just within the last 2 or 3 months, we've had one of the students at Memphis School of Preaching, Brother Darrell Broking. He's a good preacher. I know because I heard him. And he's got a little boy that can lead songs like you wouldn't believe. Good family. He committed himself to go to carry the gospel into Russia. He was going to go as a full-time worker into Murmansk. He tried. For months he tried to raise support. And he did get somebody to sponsor him in the sense that they would receive and disburse funds. but not in the sense that they would pay us full support. And after he had worked for all those months, finally he decided that they just were not our brethren, were not going to make the money available, and he has given it up. He said, I just cannot get the money together. I wish that those two brethren were as cantankerous as I am, and would say that they're going to go, that no matter how long it takes, they're just going to do it anyway. And I believe that the Lord would finally honor that to the extent that they'd find a way to do it. And that may be what it's going to take. But I say all that, brethren, to say this. The Apostle Paul, when he went out, was sent by the church of Antioch. It didn't take him very long to get past the line of communication. And the further west he went, first into Cyprus, and then into the mainland, going up into Turkey, what we call Turkey, Asia Minor. It wasn't long until he got past where there was any way for that church back at Antioch to communicate with him. Time came when he finally had to decide whether he was going to be able to go ahead or not. And he found that he had a trade that was saleable. It was tent making. And as a result, he had to fall back on his tent making in order to keep going. And we find that he did in Corinth, for instance. There was a time when the church at Philippi sent once and again to his support after he had gone out that far. And I honor those brethren that they did that. But apparently the other churches that he had planted them too. They seemingly, either the idea didn't cross their mind or they were not willing to send the support. It just didn't come. It came, at one time he had no support except from Philippi. I know that it's scriptural for us to help such brethren because Philippi helped Paul. And I rather need to read more about what Philippi did and go down and do likewise. But when the time would come that he didn't have enough support, he and his fellow workers, he could make tents and make money and not only support himself but help support those others that were working with him. Our brotherhood is forever trying to figure out a way not to do mission work. Not to. They seemingly had the idea that go ye meant someone else. They didn't mean go me. There are only two ways that you can go with the gospel. One is to go yourself, and the second is to support those who go. And there aren't any other ways. You can look your Bible through and you won't find them. There are not any other ways. Now, if you don't go yourself, then you have eliminated one of those ways. And if you do not support those who go, you've eliminated the other. And when the gospel said that it was given to it shows it was given to the 11, but they were told to tell those that they won to Christ to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And therefore it was necessary for those people to go the same as it was the apostles. We've had many a brother say, well, that was just for the apostles. That's not the way it reads. Teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you includes you and me. And it includes all Christians that would follow after. We're all to being commanded to do the same thing. And so, if you and I are going to be the kind of Christians and the kind of church that our Lord had in mind, then we have to be an evangelistic church. I don't know how much it would take to get to evangelize this whole world. Sometimes people say, well, why couldn't they do it the same way then as now? Why couldn't they just go and support themselves by work? They could, if the country where they go would permit it. But do you know that most countries nowadays, now it was different then, nowadays almost every country requires that you have to have two sponsors. One to guarantee that you don't become a public liability once you get there, and the other one locally to see that you for sure will get going back to where you came from in case you run out of money. And they will not let you work in secular work. And the reason that you can't do it like Paul did, making tents, is simply because almost all the countries will not allow it today. It cannot be done on that basis. But we have a great work to perform. We are trying to get the gospel to all the nations. I had hoped that my generation would be the one that would do it. And I think that if it had not been for the anti-cooperation people and the liberals, I am persuaded that we would have done it in this generation. Because, brethren, we were well on the way. We really were. But we cannot say what might have been. We have got to do what we can with what we have. I was so pleased when Brother Leroy Brownlow gave us the permission to put his little book on why he's a member of the Church of Christ into the Russian language. We were able to get this translated. Look at there. Man, can you read that? No, you can't. Yeah, that's right. That doesn't look like reading to me. That's Russian. Each of those cost us $2. I forget how many we published. Was it 2,000, 2,500? I think it might have been 2,500. $5,000 would print. Would print 2,000 of these, or maybe 2,000. How much ever that is. But somebody's got to give the money. You have to have fellowship in order to accomplish. We're finding that one of the greatest ways we have now to get the gospel, particularly into India, is through radio, to get the contact, and the printed page, such as the Basic Bible Course, which is now into at least 2 or 3 of their languages. They have at least 26 as far that many states. I was told they have about 45 major languages and about 815 dialects, but it's a lot of dialects and a lot of languages. And it means, brethren, that you don't just put it into one, you have to put it into all. If we're going to get the gospel to all the nations in all the world and to every creature. I'm praying that you that are elders here, when you go back home, will begin to reconsider some things. First of all, how about your eldership sending somebody to some congregation or some country that doesn't have the gospel? You say, not us. Well then, this church could have taken the same attitude. They send me. They're not a big church. This congregation may be 120. And they send me. What about you? Could you be a sponsoring congregation? How about doing it? Or, if you couldn't be a sponsoring congregation, have fellowship. How much fellowship? I'm not talking about a token fellowship. I'm talking about unleashing your financial strength and putting it into evangelizing this world. If you really believe in the Great Commission, I believe that's what you would do. And I'm praying to God that you elders, when you get home, will begin to think like that. And don't wait till somebody comes and asks you, why don't you think about volunteering yourselves to do it? And then find a man that you can depend upon and send him and his family and do what you can to get the gospel to every creature among all the nations in all the world while you live. I appreciate the fact that this work that has been done in Asia, particularly, and now into other countries that I have been involved in, has had a helpmeet by the name of Veda Lavon Rice. And she's sitting right there. There are so many that...
Thank you, Michael.